I don't think we've got a talent shortage, actually. I think we've got a shortage of people who know where to go find talent.
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
Cybersecurity Collaborative and Google is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership with one of the contributors to my latest book, the #1 best-selling CISO Compass: Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers, as well as from other top CISOs and cybersecurity thought leaders. Listen to the previous CISO Stories episodes at securityweekly.com/CSP. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC or visit cyberleadersunite.com. I'm your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Helen Patton, CISO at Cisco Security Business Group.
I ended up in cybersecurity completely by accident. So I had moved from Australia to the United States in the 90s and accidentally ended up working in IT. And I was really sort of a systems administrator, IT person. I've never done software development, as it turns out, but I've done a lot with operating systems, desktops, networks, telephony, all the infrastructure side of things. And I was doing that at a time where viruses were happening, Y2K happened, all kinds of sort of disruptive cyber-ish sort of events happened. And the CIO of the company I was working with at the time said, we need someone to do security, and Helen, you're it. And ta-da, I was in security. And that was in, really sort of post 9/11, so 2001, 2002, and I've been in security ever since.
That's a great story, and I hear of so many people that came from a networking background, and it seems to be such a really good fit.
Yeah, for sure. I actually find there's a little bit of an age difference to that. So folks of my age tend to come from an infrastructure database sort of background, mostly, not completely, of course, but mostly. And then kids these days, get off my lawn. The kids these days are typically coming through a software development kind of path more frequently. The infrastructure is just the background noise that lets them do gaming or whatever. And so I'm not finding as many folks interested in pursuing an infrastructure-based career path anymore, actually. So, yeah.
I started off as a programmer, and after 2 years of that, decided I really wasn't very good at that and became a database administrator.
I did DBA work too, I guess. Yeah.
So then I was leading DBAs for the first half of my career, and then I moved into security the second half of the career.
That's right.
So those two are very. So it's interesting to me that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about the supply side security, how to maintain a talent pipeline.
Yeah.
So tell us, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's definitely this ongoing conversation about not having enough talent, and I just actually spent earlier this week. I was at the NICE conference in Seattle, which is NICE, for folks who don't know, is a subset of NIST. And NICE stands for something like the National Institute of Cybersecurity Education, and they are all about cybersecurity workforce development. And I was there representing the voice of the CISO, really, to this group of government, academic, private sector kind of folks who care about this stuff. It was great. I don't think we've got a talent shortage, actually. I think we've got a shortage of people who know where to go find talent. And that's a slightly different view of the world, I know, and I'm going to get all kinds of people on LinkedIn who are going to yell at me. I think we are suffering from some challenges. I think if you're in a security team, most security teams don't have enough people to start with, and those people tend to be 100% or more occupied with their day job. And then we turn around to them and say, hey, well, if you're going to get more talent, you need to train people on the job. And they're like, yeah, with what spare hour of the day am I going to train these people? Because I don't have any spare cycles and you want me to turn around and train people. But I think we do need to take a step back and say part of the job of doing security is, for everyone, I don't care what kind of security role you're in, is training somebody else to do security as well. And so I'm a big believer in finding pathways into security where people can learn on the job. I think our colleges and our community colleges and our high schools even and our boot camps are doing a fine job teaching people theory. But the industry as a whole criticizes the academic side of the world for not training people on real world things, or not keeping up with changes in technology or whatever, like being behind. Well, I don't think it's reasonable for us to expect traditional education to be current, because that's our job, to be current. But I do think we then need to recognize that there's this missing last piece of education, which is on-the-job learning, and only we can provide that kind of training. So I think we need to restructure our teams and restructure the way we think about onboarding people, to not just get people trained up enough to land the job in the first place, but to train people up so that they can experience the jobs of cybersecurity and then grow from there and be assisted on the grow. And we don't do a really great job of that today.
What are some of those skill areas you think that we need to give that on-the-job training?
Well, I think some of it is all of it. So one of the things I would say is we use terms that we think we all know, like vulnerability management or identity and access management, or the functional areas of security. But how that's expressed in an organization, I think, depends on the organization, because it depends on the risk profile and the risk culture of where you're doing security. So in my career, I spent 10 years at JP Morgan as a Wall Street bank, and then I spent 8 years as a CISO in higher education. And now I'm at Cisco in tech. And in each case, we all do something like vulnerability management, but we did it in different ways everywhere. Like, yes, there's a scanning thing, there's a classification thing, there's a remediation thing, and all those things are true. But what you scan, how often you scan, the tools you use to scan, the criticality that you put on different findings, the values that drive those ratings change, what you choose to accept or not accept. Like, everything is varied on your industry, the size of your organization, your tech stack, all of those things. So context is local. And every single security job has this local contextual element to it. And so I think there has to be continued on-the-job training. So I can take someone who's done vulnerability management at JP Morgan and have them do vulnerability management in higher ed. And that's a path. There's going to be a learning curve to that. Or I can take somebody who's in higher ed who doesn't know vulnerability management, train them up on vulnerability management. And guess what? The pathway to competency is the same, regardless of the direction you're coming from. So, I think there's that. I think it's any job is the answer to that question.
It's interesting you mentioned vulnerability management, because one of our executive committee members for the Cybersecurity Collaborative, which is one of the sponsors of this podcast, is Ron Green, who is the CISO for MasterCard. And he was telling us in one of our executive committee meetings that he was talking about vulnerability management. He says he has a lot of people at their company that have been there for many, many years. And he likes to bring in new people from other places, because they may have a different way of doing vulnerability management. And we don't learn that unless we bring in those other skill sets.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's also, I find it interesting, there are roles in an organization that are adjacent to security that aren't security jobs. It could be HR, it could be recruiting, it could be finance, it could be business analysis, it could be IT, but they all touch security some way. And I like bringing people from those areas into the security team directly, because they bring the customer view with them. And that also changes and makes better, I think, the way we do security too. So what I'm seeing across the industry is we don't have a problem finding entry-level people or people where we don't expect them to have any experience. We're willing to train them up. That's not where we've got shortage. Where we've got shortage is in the sort of 5 to 15-year career range, where they've started down the path of doing some work, some career, and now from a security perspective, they go, this is not the career for me, and they leave. And now we've got to backfill them. So if I think about the cybersecurity workforce, we've got a lot of people at the bottom, got a fair amount of people actually at the top, although retirements are coming soon, right? But in the middle, in that middle career space, we're losing people, and we're having trouble bringing people in laterally who already have 5 to 10 years of experience in their current job outside of security. So I'm really looking for us as an industry to invest in mid-career people who want to transfer laterally into cyber as the place where we're going to make the most difference in terms of our deficits.
But how difficult is that? I mean, if I have a HR person who chose this job this path as a HR person, they went to school, they came out, they've been in HR for 15 years, and now we say to them, hey, there's a great opportunity for you over in cybersecurity. Are they going to look at us with 4 eyes, or how do we do that?
I think there's a lot of people who want to come over already. I will tell you, just because, I wrote this book about careers in cyber and stuff, I have lots of people who reach out to me like, hey, I've been 10 years a project manager and I want to do cyber stuff, not just project manage cyber projects, but I want to do cyber stuff. Or I'm in marketing and I'd really like to work in a SOC or whatever. Like I get these kinds of calls. The pathways are not clear at the moment. And I think what we as the hiring managers need to understand is if we're going to pull these people, one, they've got all kinds of local context already. So we don't have to train them up on how the business works because they know. And we don't have to train them up on basic office or at work from home protocols because they're already doing it. So they've got a whole bunch of non-security skills that they bring with them, but we need to give them that path into the security skills. So I think we need to think of them as entry level in that we need to really invest in a lot of training in the beginning for them. But we don't need to think of them as entry level in terms of their maturity or their ability to come up to speed way faster than a college kid coming out of college with no other experience either. So, yeah, in the first year, maybe half that year is spent in a classroom. Maybe we invest in them to do a professional certificate in cyber or some kind of boot camp or something like that. And yeah, we're not going to get full value out of them for 6 to 12 months. That's okay. But boy, they're going to come up to speed fast. So I think we need to be thinking about the onboarding of people who are mid-career differently than we would somebody who's already been in the industry for a while, or even somebody who's an entry-level person just coming out of college or high school. It's a different path, but it's a valid path nonetheless.
The article this podcast is based upon can be viewed in the best-selling cybersecurity leadership book, CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers. Yeah, I have your book on my bookshelf back here. I think it's a great resource. Yeah. And what I like about it is just, when you're looking at that career path, I was going to write that book and then I saw that you already wrote that book. I said, well, Helen's already done a fantastic job on that book. I don't need to write this now. so
I appreciate that.
It's a great book. But I in terms of getting people to acclimate into this environment, what about retention? Do you see that they're coming in and they're staying, or is it for a short period of time?
In general, I think people who come into security tend to stay. I think it's pretty sticky. I think where I see people start to waver is if they don't have a support structure around them, not just in the company that they're working in, but also sort of a broader network of folks outside of the company that can help them. More junior people have less of a need for that. I think junior people need the network to get into security in the first place. But once you've been in for five to 10 years or so, you need a network of people. So you've got sort of a support structure for the things that you're dealing with. The people who tend to stay in have this network of people that, yes, on the job, can be the place where they go, where they're just having difficulty in their role. But they need a network outside of the company, because a lot of the stress that we deal with as security professionals comes from the company itself. There's interpersonal stress, like everybody deals with in any industry, right? My manager's an idiot, or I love my manager, or I've got this customer who's a real, pain. How do I deal with that? Those things can be dealt with internally, but some of it is just culturally, how do I deal with this? And if I'm going to grow, actually, I get my knowledge from outside the company. So like your example of the CISO from MasterCard, bringing people into the company to help the company keep its processes and its thinking fresh, individuals need to have an external network so that they can be thinking in a fresh way, so that they can continue to add value to their organization. But also it becomes a place where you go, hey, I'm trying to do this thing in my organization. I'm not really sure if it's great. How could I do that? How can I learn from you on the outside so that I can do things better on the inside, or I can handle the stress of what I'm dealing with on the inside a little bit better? My personal experience and my personal career is that I probably spent the first 10 or 15 years thinking I should do it all by myself. And it wasn't until I started building a community of people, both online and in person, that I realized that there was all these people who wanted me to be successful outside of my day job that I wasn't leveraging, and I wasn't contributing to either. So yeah, I think overall it's a sticky profession. People who come in tend to stay, but mid-career they really start needing help to be able to get through some of the rocky bits.
Mm-hmm. And I find that one of the things we've had discussions about is that there's a bunch of CISOs that have been around for a while that have established these networks and have all these people, and then there's this next tier that are going to be replacing those CISO jobs that don't necessarily have that same outside network, or haven't established that network with others. So, what should we be doing with that?
I do think the role of a CISO leader or a senior director of security is to bring people along with them. So some of the networking groups that I'm a part of, we've got sort of an OG group of, this is the old guard group. And we've also got a junior group that we will introduce, and we purposely mentor them and we connect them up, and then they will become the OGs after us, right? So I think you've got to be super intentional about it. I also think, it's a life stage thing a little bit too. Like when you're like me and you've been doing security 30 years, it means your kids are grown up. It means they've probably left the house. It means you don't have to deal with young kids, perhaps. I'm generalizing in a very bad way, but in general, you got a little bit more time to do the networking thing, right? So I think as a more junior person who's, maybe married with a spouse or young kids, or having other family commitments that stops them from having the time, frankly, to do this kind of work, I think people like me can help them by bringing what we're learning from our networks and bringing them back into the organization. So I'm a big proponent in the team of being able to say, how do we share what we know? When someone goes to a conference or a networking event, how do they come back and disseminate at least the high points of the things that they've learned? Yeah. Can we bring people who are part of my network into a team meeting just as a guest speaker so people can get to know who these people are and how they think? It's stuff like that I think we can be intentional about. Mm-hmm. But it's tough. You're right. There's definitely a cohort of people that are heavily networked, and there are people who are not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think there's, we've had in some of these breaches, we usually get the, oh, well, how was that person a CISO? They were a music major. And
Yeah.
do you see any backgrounds that have kind of surprised you that are, wow, these are making great security people?
Actually, music teachers, people who are trained as music teachers, have been some of my best security people ever. I just want to throw that out there. No, I think people surprise me. I don't think it's about your classical training. We tend to get hung up on people's resumes, right? I've been a developer for this long, or I've been a this or a that, or I haven't been a this or a that. But especially in this industry, as you know, there aren't a lot of standards for how we should work or what we should do. And most of us have lived in this environment trying things out, making things up as we go. Yes, we've got compliance rules and regulations and all of those things, but even those regulations tend to talk in terms of outcomes that are needed and aren't particularly prescriptive in terms of how you actually do it. There's a lot of wiggle room there, right? So we need people who can come in and think for themselves and be creative. And you can get that from a software engineer or an architect, but you can also get it from an English major or a philosophy major, right? So, and especially now as artificial intelligence is coming on, what are the skills that make you a great prompt engineer? Well, it's somebody who knows how to ask a really good question and discern whether the answer is good. Well, where do you get that? You get that from a philosophy class. You don't get that from an engineering class, right? So it'll be interesting to see what those key trainings are, but what you're trained in and what you're capable of are two different things. And I think sometimes we forget that.
Yeah, I think that's great perspective. And I find, when we look at music, it's if anybody would know patterns and how things relate to each other, it would be musicians.
That's right.
Something that I always aspired to. I played a kazoo band at a football game once. I don't know that counts as a musician.
Hey, anything counts. It's fine. It's fine. It's artistic.
So what sort of certifications or degrees in security, what's the right approach if somebody is newer coming into the field and they want to make that transition? Should they be going after those degrees? Should they be getting their CISSP? What would be your roadmap for that?
Yeah, so I talk about it through two lenses. One is what I would call the traditional path, which is someone who's out in high school right now and they're like, I want to work in security. How do I get there? And then there are people who are already doing something else. These are the lateral movers, right? And how did they get there? And I think there's two different paths to it. If you're the graduating high school senior at the moment, and you want to do cyber, I would say go and get a cybersecurity degree. Why not? It could be a 2-year degree at a community college, which is going to be much more hands-on. It could be a 4-year degree or a master's or a PhD. It's going to be completely theoretical. In both cases, though, I would encourage people to get as much hands-on experience as they can. So to the extent they can do a cyber degree that also comes with internships or the ability to take what they learn and apply it in quote unquote the real world, they should probably do that. And I think that's a perfectly logical path if you want to get into cybersecurity. You don't have to do it that way, though. I teach an undergrad class at Ohio State that's on cyber risk management, and it doesn't require technical skills to do that class. It's really just an introductory class, but a number of those students will leave there. They don't come from the computer science or the cybersecurity IT background, but they come from things like international studies or philosophy or that kind of languages even. And then they will go off and do the parts of cybersecurity where, they need to know tech because it's a tech profession, but that's not where they spend their days doing tech. And they're great. For the people who are already in another job, it's really hard to tell them to go back to school full time to get a degree in order, like even a master's degree, in order to move into cybersecurity. If they can do it, maybe. But I'm less inclined for them to go get another degree in cyber in addition to some other degree they have. Maybe this is where certifications or perhaps a boot camp can come into play. But for me, you've got to watch it. Boot camps get someone who's a cybersecurity professional to look at the curriculum and tell you whether they think that curriculum has value before you invest in a boot camp. I'm sort of throwing that out there because they're super expensive for what you get. So make it worth your while. Certifications are an interesting thing. When I talk to CISOs collectively, as a general rule, they would say, if you don't have on-the-job experience, the certification doesn't mean too much. It means you can read a book and you can pass an exam, and there's some benefit to that. But it may get you enough to get you an interview, but it's not going to be enough to get you a job. So the certifications, I like to encourage people to use it. If you don't know about a particular subject area, certainly look at the material in a certification and get to know those terms and get to know those functional areas, but don't equate having a certification with mastery of the subject matter. I think that comes with time in role. So, yeah, and most of the general certs that we know, like the CISSP or the CISA or whatever, require 5 years of work experience along with the certification. So you can't just go and get a general cert and then go get a job. It's got to be hand in hand.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a great discussion, Helen, and I could keep talking about this topic. It's something I'm very passionate about, and I love your perspective on things.
Yeah.
So what final advice would you give to emerging CISOs, new CISOs, current CISOs, experienced CISOs, as they're trying to find the right talent in their organizations?
Yeah. So one, network. Because often you're going to find people in unique places you wouldn't have thought about or would not apply to your job. So you've got to go to the talent. You can't just sit back and wait for the talent to come to you. So reach out to the organizations, the professional organizations, the organizations that promote diversity and equity, inclusion, underrepresented folks. So go to the talent is the first thing. The second thing is be prepared to invest in people after they get the job. It's not just about getting them to a point where you can hire them. It's also about bringing people on who may not have all the skills you're looking for, but you want to do a really deep investment, particularly in the first 1 or 2 years that they're working with you, to bring them up to speed as fast as you can, but also to demonstrate to them that you're willing to invest in them and their career. So be prepared to invest and go to the mat to get the funding to do that. It can be really tough to sell that to your finance partners, that your security people are going to need more budget for training and networking than perhaps other parts of the organization, but it's worth doing if you can do it. So those would be the two things.
Great advice. Thanks for taking the time, Helen, today. This has been very insightful.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Todd. It's been great.
Thank you.
Are you constantly thinking about how to keep your enterprise as secure as possible? Get to know Chrome Enterprise, the browser that will secure your organization without the added expense and complexity of additional browsers. Its simplified management features will free up your team to focus on critical security tasks that can be overlooked because of time and attention it takes to manage other solutions. Don't settle for a browser that compromises your organization. Visit securityweekly.com/Chrome now to start protecting your organization like never before.